It was Pop's version of war games, and I called it my first going for the gold. One Saturday evening in warm weather, Pop, pleasantly drunk as usual on sweet red wine and ginger ale, Florence liked them too, invited Jimmy and me to have a foot race around the block in front of all the neighbors sitting out on their steps prior to shelling out our weekly movie money. A simple ordinary foot race around the pavements of a city block is no big deal, but remember, Jimmy could really run fast. So to me, this was no simple ordinary foot race. Pop insisted we stand back to back, and when he yelled go, we ran in opposite directions to go for the gold. Pop would stand weaving in front of the house, holding a quarter out for the winner, which meant no candy and many tears for the loser. The first couple of weeks he beat me easily, until I realized making a deal with Jimmy after the race for sharing candy was not an option, so I had to learn to cheat. I learned all the shortcuts where the neighbors couldn't see me. Like when I was out of sight, I cut down alleys or skipped through the Protestant schoolyard. And my absolute favorite, shoving him into the street when we passed each other or running straight at him and bowling him over. Anything to shave the advantage where only a few steps made the difference. I laughed when I finally won while Jimmy cried. He was a crybaby anyway, who cared? Truthfully, for me, the quarter wasn't the issue. It never was. Winning was always the issue. Somehow or other, the loser would get his quarter if we pouted or whined long enough after the humiliation of losing. So it was never really the candy for me. It was the losing in front of the neighbors that I hated most. Jimmy had a real mean streak and eventually became a great athlete, but he could never beat me in a public contest or a fight after that summer. One Saturday night, a few weeks later, Jimmy did not make it home in time for supper or the race. Jimmy was late for supper. The door blew open amid high-pitched screams from Jimmy, who had blood streaming down his face. He was carrying his own wet clothes and was dressed only in wet underwear. Pop lost it. So did Florence. They assembled the neighborhood vigilantes. In Kensington, vigilantes were real. They will hurt you. The hunt was on for a pedophile or a psychopathic maniac around the old swimming hole in the Frankford Creek, the place of the attack, according to Jimmy. Wow, it was the talk of the town for weeks. Much later, even years later, Jimmy admitted to me secretly that he staged the whole damn thing, including cutting his own face with a piece of glass because he was swimming and he was late for supper. I was in awe. This was the type of mentality I respected, and I understood. My brother had pure survival instinct. Kensington wasn't much, at least it wasn't much fun. I developed plenty of personal friends with the regular kids in the row houses on the block, but Jimmy would go out of his way to screw with them and start a fight where I had to take sides. It was awful. With Florence coming and going regularly, we both felt embarrassed and avoided going into any of our friends' houses. I got sick of explaining about my father's drinking and my stepmother being away all the time. It was just too much hassle. It was much easier to avoid neighbors, and besides, somehow we knew it would not last anyway. And eventually, instructions finally came by phone from Mount Airy. Florence had been gone for a long time. Grandma called one of our next door neighbors and instructed Pop to pack Jimmy's winter clothes and ship him back to Mount Airy on the 23 trolley car as soon as possible. Actually, instructions were for both of us. I've never admitted that before. I lied about the message to Pop. I was asked to come next door by the neighbor. I answered the phone. I took the message from Grandma, but I absolutely refused to leave Pop alone. Pop was always drunk. He needed me to take care of him, and I had it made. Candy money anytime I wanted it, movie money anytime I wanted it, and all without the race. I could go to Horner Hardert's Automat and have mac and cheese, and I never had to go to school. All the good things in life were right at my fingertips. However, the neighbors eventually reported me to the Child Welfare Department for living alone, not attending school, and taking care of my father when he was around. One Saturday morning, Pop came back from the next door neighbor's house and said, "Tommy, you have to take Jimmy's summer clothes to your grandma's on the 23 trolley car today." And he packed me a suitcase, both full and heavy, plus gave me the money for the trolley care. I just turned 13 years old. I took the 56 car to Germantown and Erie Avenues. I transferred to 23 South, and I ended up in South Philly. A kind-hearted trolley conductor gave me the benefit of the doubt at the end of the line when he explained I explained the financial problem and was allowed to ride it free all the way back north to Mount Airy. I got off at Mount Pleasant Avenue, lugged the suitcase 3 blocks to Grandma's. God, she was glad to see me and took me immediately upstairs to her bedroom. She dialed the phone, and after a moment's wait, she handed me the receiver. "Here, talk to your father." Pop said, "Tommy, it was your clothes that were in the suitcase. You can't come back. You have to live with your grandma from now on. Just remember, I love you." That was the last time I saw or heard from Pop for a long, long while. Oh well, at least now I fully belonged and I was a fully fledged orphan. It was easier to say than to my new Mount Airy friends than it was to explain that my father had left me for a couple of bottles of beer. Anyway, we weren't through moving. Even in Mount Airy, I wasn't finished with moving around. The first few days at Grandma, I had to sleep in the same room with Jimmy. He breathed with a sort of a snore on the way in and a whistle on the way out. It drove me absolutely bats. Aunt Bert, my mother's sister, lived 3 blocks away. She had her own daughter, 4 years younger than me, and she asked me if I wanted to sleep over there for a few nights in my own bedroom. Oh my God, there is a God. They, Aunt Bert and Uncle Connie, also had a son in the hospital for the mentally disabled. He had Down syndrome and went away about the age of 2 or so and never returned. So I was a natural replacement, but I never sensed that in them. They never brought that to my attention. No one ever talked about it at that moment in time. One thing I knew for certain, I was not going to live with Jimmy, so I accepted on the spot when they offered me the opportunity to have my own bedroom and live with them as their son. They were the most kind and understanding people I ever knew in my life. A few years ago, during a visit, Aunt Bert told me that when she met me at age 13, I was the most traumatized child she had ever met. She said I hid in the cellar from the weekend ice cream truck when I heard the bells clanging because I thought they were the child welfare agency coming after me. I had a lot of catching up to do. I'd been cutting school regularly at Stetson Junior High for almost 2 years. I convinced Pop to take me out of Catholic school in favor of a public education in the 7th grade. I told him and Florence I liked the long walk every day, but the real reason was my new social friends did not know anything about my parents. When I switched back to Mount Airy while living with the Gunthers, that's Aunt Bert and Uncle Connie's last name, it was early spring. Aunt Bert insisted I go back to Catholic school, and Northeast Catholic High School was her target. I panicked. I knew for certain they would lead me back. That's what they did to Jimmy. They sent him back 2 years. I was in pure panic. Being left back was worse than losing the quarter. No way was I going backwards. Uncle Connie took me to North Catholic to meet Father Quayle, a priest disciplinarian. He said gently but firmly, "Son, you never even had a course in religion, in algebra, or Latin in public school. It's impossible for you to catch up with the same 9th grade class you want to join in our school." We were at the very end of the school year, the end of the semester, as they say, and you must repeat at least 1 school year. Uncle Connie saw the look on my face and quickly said, "What if he passes the 9th grade courses in summer school?" The priest laughed out loud and said, "If he can do that, we'll put him in advanced college prep." Meant, of course, to be a smart-ass remark. Uncle Connie drove me to summer school every morning to West Catholic, way across Philadelphia from Mount Airy, way out of his way on the path to work every day. And I took 2 trolley cars home. I studied every afternoon on the front porch as Ginny, my new foster sister, watched. as did Al, my cousin, the same age, in the same ninth grade class, who lived across the street, always shouted and touted, "Tombo the Dumbo," every chance he got, and laughed at my effort for the whole summer. At the end of the summer, I got the gold. I got 3 solid A's in summer school for Latin, algebra, and religion. And I can tell you they were the last A's I ever received in high school. During the next 3 years, I worked most weekdays in the winter months in a sheet metal shop and in retail stores, and summers as a busboy and a helper in a caddy shack at a local country club. I graduated high school in the middle of the crowd with a solid B average. I knew I could get A's anytime I wanted to. I also knew from the summer school experience that I could relax a bit and just go for the bronze or the silver, not always going for the gold, unless the heat was on me. Uncle Connie taught me that trick during our lectures every morning. He was the first human being ever to tell me I was good at anything. That he told me that I could be a lawyer like my Uncle Charlie someday because of summer school. He gets all the credit for my A effort, not me. I just went along for the ride. I thought getting an A was what they expected for me to have my own bed. What I actually enjoyed about getting A's was simply that it taught Father Quayle to eat his own words as he approved me with a big smile into the advanced college prep courses going into my regular year as a sophomore. Jimmy and I became total strangers growing up apart in Mount Airy in 2 different houses and 2 different cultures. He hung out with the tough guys at the sweet shop. I hung out at Doc's pharmacy with the ones who wanted to go to college. When together, it was always a big fight over who was the real phony. I hated it. I believed truly he hated me. It was simple, just to avoid each other at all costs and be as polite as possible in public until the fist fight started. Boy, could we fight. As high school bore on, for all intents and purposes, Jimmy dropped out of my existence when we moved back to Mount Airy. Sometime during my original exodus from Mount Airy, Mount Airy had gone preppy. In Kensington, I was into greasy hair and peg pants. Wearing them back in Mount Airy was embarrassing. I had only my Kensington tough guy peg pants. Gads. I had to get a haircut and a job immediately and started buying preppy clothes because I wanted to fit in. I was exhausted emotionally and socially when I got back to Mount Airy, and I needed to fit in somewhere. I often, even to this day, thank God for the Gunthers. At their house, at least I really did feel like I fit in. Fitting in. I binged on fitting in. I imitated. I copied. I practiced others' walks. I practiced their tones, their inflections, anything to fit in with the team or in with the crowd. I got along with everyone and made an effort to do it. It was never easy. I had to convince them I was worthy, I was intelligent, or I was brave enough, or whatever it was that I had to do to gain their confidence. And I had a varied group of friends. I was learning to become dependent on my own personality and my own ideas. I was usually guessing right about most things that came across us, and made friends that became friends for my entire life. I treasured them, and vice versa. Next is chapter 3. Whew, at last, a normal childhood.